Okay. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the annual Snyder Book Collecting Contest. I know why everyone is here. I know why everyone is here. We are here because we love books, right? Woo! This is such an amazing event. If this is your first time attending the Snyder Book Collecting Contest ever, be prepared to be charmed. It's going to charm your socks off. And if this is not your first time attending the Book Snyder Collecting event, I know, like me, you've been waiting 364 days since the last one to come back and attend this one because it charmed your socks off the first time, and people come back year after year after year. This event has been running since 1956. It is going to be 70 years old next year. I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about the history of this amazing event, but we like big centennial years around here, so we might have to do something special for the 70th year. But you know, it's not just that we love books. This is such a unique opportunity to get a window into another person, right? Because the books we collect are so deeply personal. They are statements about who we are, what makes us unique, what makes us distinctive. And having the opportunity, you know, when you visit someone's house and you get to peruse their book collection, there's just something voyeuristic about it. And this is like voyeurism times how many tables are out there. But no, really, books are a window into who we are as humans. It's such a joy to behold. The topics out there are so incredibly varied, and it's wonderful to talk with people about their book collecting passions and their personal passions. So my notes say that this is the 67th annual Snyder Book Collecting Contest. So am I not able to count years?
I think in 2020.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we've got some folks to acknowledge because these types of events require a lot of hands on deck. It does take quite a large group of individuals to make any event like this possible. We absolutely need to begin with our all important judges who have been judging today. So our judges for this year are Beth Whitaker, Executive Associate Dean and Director of Spencer Research Library. She has been a longtime judge for the Snyder Book Collecting Contest. She knows what she's doing. Also Bev Bradshaw, longtime supporter of KU Libraries and a highly valued member of our KU Libraries Board of Advocates. Thank you for serving this year. We also had as a judge this year, Tiffany Hagan, doctoral student in the Department of Theater and Dance and a former winner 2 years ago of the Snyder Book Collecting Contest in the graduate division. Tiffany, where are you? Yay, thank you for joining us. And then finally, another judge is our keynote speaker for this evening, Laura Moriarty, who is a best-selling novelist and a professor of creative writing at KU. And you will be hearing more from her very shortly. Thank you for joining us today. I'd also like to recognize the members of the Snyder Contest Committee who worked throughout the year organizing this and making today possible. This year's committee is Erin Wolf, Digital Initiatives Librarian. Erin. Wendy Conover, Communications Coordinator for the libraries. Thank you, Wendy. Eve Walleness, our Special Collections Curator, served this year. Thank you, Eve. Sarah McCall, our Undergraduate Engagement Librarian. Warren Lambert, Digitization Specialist Extraordinaire. Warren, thank you. And Rachel Barnes, who joins us from the KU Bookstore. And I should also mention that this program is co-sponsored by KU Libraries and Jayhawk Inc. over at the Union. I also want to thank our KU Libraries Office of Communications and Advancement for planning such a lovely event for us this afternoon. And then last but certainly not least, we all need to recognize one person who truly laid the foundations for this exceptional contest, and that is the late Elizabeth Snyder. You can see photographs of her on the back table if you would like to get to know her a little bit more. I'm going to share a little bit about her and how this contest got started. In late 1956, then Dean of Libraries Robert Vosper wrote a letter to Mrs. Snyder about his idea for encouraging young people, quote, to buy or collect their own books and begin to learn something of the pleasure of having interesting private collections of books at home. No one will know better than you how much pleasure and excitement this can bring. Mrs. Snyder wrote back, and she replied that, quote, your idea, Dean Vosper, for developing a student's interest in books and book collecting is basically so sound and so full of fruitful thought that I couldn't help but be interested. And she immediately offered financial support for the contest. Although Mrs. Snyder claimed that she was not really much of a collector, she did build many remarkable collections, including one that she started back in high school on A.A. Milne, best known as the creator of Winnie the Pooh. Her collection of essayist and journalist H.L. Mencken works includes inscribed first editions, letters written by Mencken, and periodicals that Mencken edited. Both of these collections, her Milne collection and her Mencken collections, are now part of a series of generous donations that Mrs. Snyder made to KU libraries over the years. Quote, to have what I have collected be useful for research is what is important, she said. I feel it should be where it can be enjoyed by so many, and that is definitely taken place. Mrs. Snyder later established an endowment through the KU Endowment Association to provide permanent funding for tonight's competition. And until her death in 2004, Mrs. Snyder attended this award ceremony to share her enthusiasm for book collecting. So she is with us in spirit. We are thankful for her vision and her generosity, and we are honored to be carrying on her tradition. I think that she would be excited not only by the large and varied group of collections that were submitted this year, but also by the curiosity and the self-directed learning that these collections represent. Now, I would like to give the podium over to Beth Whitaker, and she is going to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. Good afternoon. As Carol said, we are pleased to have each and every one of you join us for this annual Snyder Book Collecting Contest. Beth Whitaker, Executive Associate Dean, Director, Spencer Research Library, and as Carol mentioned, a longtime judge. I believe that I was offered the opportunity to judge my first year back at KU, which would have been, well, the April would have been 2010, and I've been able to do it every year since, and I love it so much. It's a super busy time in April. I know the students are busy, faculty are busy, the librarians are busy, but it is so wonderful that people take the time to not only write essays and submit their collections, but also to take time out on this beautiful day when we could be enjoying all the allergens and the humidity and celebrate. And thank you to the family and friends of our finalists too for coming and supporting. Every year I get older as I look out and I see, especially the undergraduate students look younger every single year. But I know that that is because this contest continues to go on, and that makes me so incredibly happy. But you're not here to listen to me talk. You're here to listen to Laura Moriarty talk and then to find out the awards. So I'll get on with it. Laura earned her degree in social work from KU before returning for her MA in creative writing. And at some point while she was in KU, she was an RA in Hashinger Hall. Ask me how I know. She may be the person here that I have known the longest. Yeah, we could tell you some stories. She was the recipient of the George Bennett Fellowship for Creative Writing at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire and is now professor of English at KU, where she teaches creative writing. Her best-selling novel, The Center of Everything, was 2014-2015 KU Common Book. And her many just amazing works include the novels The Rest of Her Life, While I'm Falling, The Chaperone, and American Heart. Laura is a big deal. We are very thrilled to have her here with KU Libraries for the Snyder Book Collecting Contest. And her keynote that she's going to deliver today is entitled Books We Keep Close. So please help me welcome Laura Moriarty. Yeah, you have what you need.
Mhm. Now I'm just going to tell a bunch of stories about Beth in the dorm. Actually, I have to say, this is such an honor to be here, and I have learned a lot about book collections in the last 6 weeks. 2 weeks ago, if you would have asked me, about impressive book collections, I probably would have brought up or thought of Leonard Brooks, who was the father of Louise Brooks, the silent film star who was born in Kansas in Cherryvale and grew up in Cherryvale in Wichita. When Louise was 15 years old in 1922, she was already beautiful, a talented dancer, an alcoholic, deeply troubled, really funny, kind of mean. And she got into the Denishon School of Dance in New York City. Her mother didn't want to take her. She was too young to travel on her own. And so the Brooks family hired they didn't hire, they just asked a 36-year-old Wichita housewife named Alice Mills to go with her to New York for the summer. And when I heard this, I was sort of casting about for my fourth novel, right? Like, oh, what am I going to write about? And right away I thought, oh, that poor woman, that would have been awful, right? To go with this sort of headstrong, and Louise was destined for stardom. She was going to become, the icon of the silent film generation. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. Much of the chaperone was lost to history. Her real name was Alice Mills. You don't really know much about her, except for in Louise's memoir that she wrote as an old woman. She wrote, Miss Mills and I shared a love of theater, and I tolerated her provincialism. That's what Louise Brooks wrote for that whole summer. And again, that poor woman, right? What was that like? So I invented my own character, Cora Carlisle, a 36-year-old housewife in Wichita, to go with Louise for the summer, and I wrote about their summer in Wichita. So that was going to be my idea, and first I had to do all this research. And so I started with Barry Paris's biography on Louise Brooks. There are a lot of biographies about Louise Brooks. There's a Louise Brooks Society. There is so much literature about her life because so many people are fascinated with this Kansan. But this is sort of like the biography, the one by Barry Paris. And I had this dog-eared and sticky notes and some parts of it memorized because I really, even though my chaperone character was invented, I wanted everything about Louise's life to be correct. So it was like sort of a scaffolding to hang fiction on. And one thing in there was that this is, the Brooks were a wealthy family in Wichita and a very learned family. And they had a big Victorian that they called the barn. And the mother was very cultured, and the father, Leonard, was, he had so many books in his collection that, or I don't know if you'd call it a collection or just a mass. He had so many books that this house actually sank 11 inches into the ground on the side that he kept his law books. And so that's what I was thinking of with him. But I did read a lot of books. I had to acquire a lot of different kinds of books to write this, and I started with just learning about Wichita. You've seen these books like in probably drugstores. You can get these books anywhere, but they were really helpful because of all the photographs, and you can find this right now. I have the one about downtown Lawrence because it's just kind of cool. But I was trying to learn more about Wichita. I went down to the Wichita Historical Society, and I had to learn about two different eras, the eras in which Louise was growing up, and then when she fell from stardom during World War II, and she returned home after a really difficult time in her life. And so I wanted to get that era as well. I did a lot of just, reading about the 20s and what was going on in the whole nation, what it felt like to be alive at that time. Frederick Lewis Allen, I think Ben, my husband, told me about that one. That helped a lot. New World Coming, just to sort of get the idea of what the 20s were like. But, then I found stuff on eBay, like this is a like a tourist guide to New York, right? And that was so helpful because things like that helped me. It had information about subway routes and how much something would cost, and like, what neighborhood would somebody want to avoid in the evening, right? Or what neighborhood should someone go to in the evening? Um, what one could expect for comfort on the subway, or what the view from a certain restaurant might look like, and just ticket prices, things like that were just really, really helpful to have that kind of primary document. Another kind of book that I just found so helpful. I love oral histories, and this is You Must Remember This by Jeff Kisselhoff. From 1986 to 1988, Kisselhoff traversed New York City with a cassette recorder to interview older people who had lived in Manhattan their entire lives. So these are former longshoremen, bootleggers, pickle makers, butchers, community activists, housewives, and writers. And in an attempt to capture stories of old Manhattan. So a lot of these people would have been children for the time, 1922, the summer that I was writing about. And they had so many wonderful memories. And so I could get details like, my characters were often going down to the Chelsea neighborhood, which is where the National Biscuit Company factory was, an Nabisco factory. And a lot of these older people, they were older in the 80s, remembered that the air always smelled sweet like cookies, and that you could hear the whistle blow on the factory every day. And so like just little wonderful details like that I could get in. And I love anyone who does oral histories. I love reading them. And I think they're so valuable to people who come later. I'm so glad he got them before that generation passed, got their memories. Another kind of artifact that I used a lot, catalogs. Like I got this collection of catalogs from B. Altman, which is just sort of maybe a middle brow clothing catalog from 1920s. And that would tell me, what people were actually wearing, right? Because if you think 1920s now, you might think, oh, everybody was dressed like a flapper. But in fact, like most places in the early 20s, you could not show your knees. Most older women would not be doing that. Just what a dress might cost, what it might be made out of, what it might feel like. Also, there were, 2 pages of corsets, some made out of bone still, and so that was really interesting to sort of have the reality versus what my image was, or what the Halloween costume kind of is now. And then I had to learn about modern dance because that's what Louise was going to learn in the Denishon Dance Company. Fortunately, the music library at KU, they had a lot about modern dance that I could just go check out, and videos I could watch to learn because I knew nothing about the Denishon School of Dance. And then I had to learn about, because I knew Louise and her chaperone would be going to Broadway shows to pass the time or tolerate the time together. And so I learned things about what was happening on Broadway that summer, like Shuffle Along was the first all Black cast, directed by a Black director, a Black orchestra. Everything was Black Americans, and that was the Shuffle Along. And I could even find old playbills for that. The soundtrack is lost, or the musical score is lost to history, but you can still find the playbills. So I had them go to Shuffle Along because I felt confident enough from these primary documents that I could sort of piece it together in a realistic way. But I wanted to know what the theaters would look like. And again, KU Libraries came to the rescue. They had this wonderful book where it just had pictures of all the old theaters and what they would have looked like in the 20s. I didn't want them sitting on the mezzanine in a theater that doesn't have a mezzanine. It's like fine, like 95% of people will never notice, maybe 99, but that 1%, they're going to write about it. They're going to let you know. And then you just don't want it. I wanted it to be as accurate as I could get it. Anyway, the book came out and it was fine. And it was okay. It was done, right? And I thought it was interesting because, I had sort of amassed this collection, right? And I learned so much about the silent film era and about Louise Brooks and about modern dance, about the orphan train, about all the stuff that went into the book. And then, when I would do events or like people would come by in the signing line, sometimes they'd be like, oh, here, I got you this thing about silent films. And I would think, that's nice, but I'm not into that anymore, right? Like I'm done. And so I wasn't really a collector in the sense that this is about, which is what I'm learning. Because when I was done, I boxed up everything and just donated it. I was like, okay, I'm done. It served a purpose. I was just trying to do something. I was using it these books as a means to an end. And so I wasn't really a collector. I do have a bit of a collection because I teach creative writing. Teachers are the OG hoarders, right? And so I have a lot of craft books that I keep because, you always want the ones up on campus and you want the ones that you keep at your house because you never know when you're going to need them, or oh, what student might be able to use this, or oh, wouldn't this be perfect with the lesson tomorrow? So I have those kind of books. But really, if I have a true collection, I would say that I have a collection of 5 books that are very meaningful to me that I do not intend to sell and that I definitely want to keep growing. And those 5 books are 5 books from students who I have advised here at KU who have gone on to publish book length works. And that doesn't mean that only 5 from our MFA program have done that, but these are the 5 that I can say I saw these drafts when they were just getting started, just trying to find their way when it wasn't really what it was going to become. And I saw them when, the writers were feeling maybe a little bit despairing, or when they had to really push themselves to revise and find a new way to tell the story. I saw all the labor and the care that went into them and how they grew. So I'm just going to brag about these 5 for a few minutes because I'm super proud. There they are, number 5. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. It got her PhD in creative writing here at KU, I believe in 2018. New York Times called this book an exceedingly complex, inventive, resourceful examination of harm and power. And it is, and she worked hard on this book and it is powerful. The God of Endings by former MFA, graduated MFA student Jacqueline Holland. I got to blurb this one, a new kind of vampire story, and the result is a surprising and spellbinding tale, which is absolutely what it is. Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Tossig. Bussell wrote, reflecting on her journey toward disability advocacy, Rebecca Tossig's memoir and essays will make you rethink everything you previously believed about disabled people and their lives. Sitting Pretty is a rare book from a powerful new voice. And Sitting Pretty was just selected as the Read Across KU Med book. And so that made me even happier for Rebecca. All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Leon. Tracy is the daughter of refugees from Vietnam who came to Australia during the Vietnam War. She ended up working at the LA Times for a while, and then she came to KU to join our MFA program. And I could see how wonderfully talented she was right away, wanting to tell the stories of the neighborhood where she'd grown up outside of Sydney, Cabramatta, which is I didn't know any of this until I met her. It's a Vietnamese enclave of Sydney, and it's full of refugees from Vietnam and then their children who grew up in Australia. And this book, All That's Left Unsaid, is just a fantastic, super tight mystery. Oprah Daly wrote, while the mystery is compelling, like the richest literary crime fiction, this story has broader ambitions than revealing who did it. As the investigation progresses, Leon explores the contingent nature of the welcome afforded to Asian immigrants in ostensibly liberal places like Australia. Leon's poignant and impeccable storytelling shines as she lays waste to pretenses. And finally, Becky Mandelbaum was an undergrad here, but I saw the earliest stages of this wonderful novel while she was here. I'm always so delighted. I think even better than seeing my name on a book of the spine of a book is seeing my name in the acknowledgements. It's a wonderful feeling, and I was so honored to find my way into Becky's book at all. Publishers Weekly gave it a starred review and said, Mandelbaum's heartwarming and sharp-witted debut features an estranged mother and daughter, better at connecting with injured and abandoned animals than with each other. Becky grew up in Wichita as well. In Mandelbaum's big-hearted, emotional, intelligent tales, the love for animals proves irresistible. So that's my big five right now, but I know it's getting ready to grow. So it'll be 6 by next year. That's all I can say right now. Okay, so when I got asked to do this, I was I was honored, but I didn't really understand it, right? I didn't really get what you all were doing, to be honest. I kind of thought, oh, okay, it's a book collecting contest, so it'll be people collecting like first editions and signed copies and rare translations. And I thought, well, that's neat. I don't really know anything about that, but that's neat, right? And then I read the essay rules that they have to turn in these essays, the contestants, the entrants do. And the essay needs to state the collector's purpose and method in building the collection. Number 2, give ideas for the collection's future development. And number 3, communicate how the entered items form a coherent collection. And then it said collections do not need to be rare or expensive to win. And then I thought, oh, okay, that's different. That's not what so it's not going to be all first editions. It's going to be something else. And then I kind of thought, oh, okay, it's going to be like books we keep close. So when Wendy wrote and said, okay, what do you want your title to be? I thought, well, we'll call it Books That Keep Close. Books we keep close. I kind of thought, oh, it'll just be, here are the books that I like, right? I'm kind of cringing at myself now because I really didn't get it yet, right? Well, then they sent me the finalists' essays and I was blown away. I was so delighted to read these essays, which introduced me to this world in a really wonderful way. And so I remember I went down to Sunflower coffee shop to read them. I got myself a little latte and I had no idea. And so here's like a representation. That is not me. That is not me. That is a younger woman who has a neater desk and she is not at a cafe, but I was drinking a warm beverage and I was that happy. I was like, these are wonderful because reading the passionate and deeply personal essays of the finalists really set me straight on what this contest is about. Each writer collected books not to impress, not to make money, not with a goal in sight, not even to simply hunt and own, but to more fully engage with the subject that moves them, intellectually, emotionally, and even physically. I kept thinking of Julian Barnes' quote from Life with Books, where he says, to own a certain book and to choose it without help is to define yourself. And I think that is echoed in what Carol said in her opening remarks. But I saw the writers of these essays not just defining themselves, but expanding themselves, following their own paths of engagement with what continues to intrigue them, be it a specific strand of history or stories of suffering and survival, or awe-inducing science, or the balm and steady friendship of music, or the camaraderie of other people who completely get why you love a niche sport. In short, I realize these finalists are all, and I use this word as the highest compliment, which the new generation now I think takes it as, you're all complete nerds in a great way. Like I thought these people, I was reading it, I was like, the people who wrote these essays are super cool. Like they're just really into what they're into in a wonderful way. They were a delight to read. Some of you might be familiar among faculty. There's an essay going around by this a blogger named Hilarious Bookbinder, and it's called The Average College Student Today. And he is not super happy. He maybe wrote it on a bad day in a bad semester, but it's very much like, I'll tell you what's wrong with these kids today, right? Even though he says he's Gen X, so he's, I guess we're getting up there too. But he's basically saying, oh, these kids today, they can't read a full novel. They can't sit still that long. They don't have the interest. They can't do math. They can't attend class regularly. Whoop, I gave it away. Yeah, okay, whoop. I got too excited. He's like, they have no intellectual curiosity, right? And like, this is all, it's really sad. I don't know what we're going to do. The whole world's going to hell in a hell in a handbasket. Get off my lawn, all of that, right? But he gives the reason. I just couldn't wait. Now I'm going to finally get to it. This is his reason that he gives. The average student has seen college as basically transactional for as long as I've been doing this. They go through the motions and maybe learn something along the way, but it is all in service to the only conception of the good life they can imagine, a job with middle-class wages. Who named this guy hilarious? Is he? You know, and I was thinking, it's true that I haven't met these finalists, and I can't say, I can't say for sure, but the writing makes me think they really are exceptional, and so can't be used as a point against this, where he's talking about the average student. But they are students of this generation, and so they represent some of it, and perhaps more of it than hilarious bookbinder would ever guess. And in fact, with these essays, I found their approach to learning and life and engaging with the world more in line with a quote by Maya Angelou, where she says, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." Because nothing in these essays suggests that the finalists view their time at KU or their time on Earth or their time in libraries as anything close to transactional. They found themselves drawn to a specific kind of book that gave and continues to give them strength, inspiration, solace, joy, knowledge, or increased empathy for others. They're not just surviving, they're actively pursuing a better understanding of the world around them or the histories inside them. Their essays were full of passion, compassion, humor, and style, and I think Maya Angelou would approve. I'm so glad we're able to honor them today, and I want to thank each of the finalists for a truly inspiring read and truly inspiring living, and may you each continue to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. I've got goosebumps. It's true. This is a really good year for the Snyder Book Collecting Contest. And I don't know, those of you, when you come to visit, you look at the collections. I don't know if you get a chance to read the essays. You might not have time. But I think Laura is exactly right. These, maybe it's where we're at right now, and we all need a little inspiration and hope a little more than usual, but it was a great year. So now it's time to honor those finalists and announce our recipients. So we had 8 finalists, 4 undergraduates and 4 graduates. I'm supposed to say how great all their collections are, but I'm just going to skip that part because you've said it. They've assembled these collections that show the power of following one's own curiosity and exploring new ideas. Just really amazing. So finalists, as you have collected your books, you're also collecting different perspectives and possibilities and points of view, and that did truly shine through in all your collections. I want to thank the finalists for sharing your collections with us, your interests, and the pieces of yourself. So I'm going to introduce our finalists for the 67th Annual Snyder Book Collecting Contest. And students, if you're able to stand upon hearing your name and remain standing, we'll give everybody a round of applause at the end. Here is my finalist list. And I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. So in the undergraduate division, our finalists were Abraham Frederick, From Jacobins to Bonapartists, The Wars of the Coalition, the Age of Revolution. You're already standing, excellent, all right. Jasmine Hunt, Scientific Curiosity, the Human Experience as it Relates to Science and the Universe. Charles Johnson, Coming to Terms with Collective Violence, A Graphic Reconciliation. And Zoe Savage, A Comprehensive Guide to Roller Derby History and Culture. Zoe here? Okay. In the graduate division, Abby Breyer, her tears were tears of shame and loss and love, love most of all, a collection of books that made me cry. Nicholas Hoekstra, thank you. So sorry. From black and white to every shade of gray, the changing dynamics of good and evil in fantasy. Josh Navarro, First Love, Lasting Legacies, Stories of the Lives of Presidents and First Ladies. And Christine Singleton, Why Wherever God Motions, a Black Feminist Phone Tree. Thank you so much. All right, you can all sit down. We'll applaud you more later. Okay. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Okay, so now I get to announce the award recipients. I would appreciate it if each winner would join me at the podium when I call your name. You'll receive your award, and also you'll have a chance to share just a few minutes more about your collection. And I just realized that I don't think that I'm not going to be handing over anything. Yeah. Oh, if it was a snake, it would have bit me. Sorry about that. Okay. So we're going to start with the undergraduate division. Honorable mention in the undergraduate division goes to Jasmine Hunt for the collection Scientific Curiosity and the Human Experience as it relates to science and the universe. Yeah. What? Yeah. Jasmine. So Jasmine will receive a cash award in the amount of $100 and a gift card to Jayhawk Inc. So congratulations, Jasmine.
Thank you so much.
Here's your amazing certificate. And if you could tell us a little bit more about your collection,
Awesome.
we'd
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you all so much for your support. This has been a lot of fun and quite the journey. So my collection is called Scientific Curiosity, and it's how the human experience relates to science and the universe. And I first started my collection back whenever I was 5. And I had a geology books, and I would collect rocks behind my house and try and match them up and see which ones, like trying to expand my collection. And as I got older, my interest expanded as well into marine biology and climate change and biology. And then whenever I entered middle school, I loved astrophysics and I loved space and all things physics. And so I started collecting astronaut biographies, physics books, books by Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brian Greene. And so I love that, and I was going to go and pursue engineering. And in high school, I expanded into chemistry and just all things science, especially physics and chemistry. So now as a chemical engineering major, I am loving being able to apply my knowledge that I've learned in my books and apply it in research groups and just in everyday class. So I'm honored to be a part of this. Thank you all so much.
All right, so second place in the undergraduate division goes to Zoe Savage. Do we have Zoe? I really wanted to meet Zoe. Zoe's collection is the Comprehensive Guide to Roller Derby History and Culture. So Zoe will receive $250, a cash award, and a gift to Jayhawk Inc. I would love to hear more about Zoe's collection, but let's just imagine for a moment Zoe talking about that amazing roller derby collection, right? Yeah, Zoe. All right. And our first place in the undergraduate division, it is going to be awarded to Charles Johnson for the collection Coming to Terms with Collective Violence, a Graphic Reconciliation. Yeah. Charles? Yeah, come on up. Charles will receive a cash award in the amount of $500 and a gift card to Jayhawk Inc. So here is your certificate, Charles. Thank you. Congratulations. And please tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I also thought that I was not going to be able to be here, so I have something prepared that was sent to you all. But yeah, I mean, my collection, as you mentioned, is called Coming to Terms with Collective Violence, Graphic Reconciliation. And the collection really began how I think a lot of collections begin, which was more or less by accident. The summer before third grade, I had to pick out a book from the Lawrence Public Library for reading sessions at a summer camp I was at. And having enjoyed the children's series called Geronimo Stilton about the zany cartoon adventures of a rodent, I mistakenly checked out the wildly age-inappropriate book, The Complete Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And so over the following week, I devoured the novel in 30-minute segments, taking in the metaphors of Jewish mice, German cats, and Polish pigs. With only the most cursory historical context for the Holocaust it depicted. But by the end of the book, I began to understand how Spiegelman's artistry managed to usher the distant and historical past into the pressing and personal present, filling the silent pages with images, making the case that we all have a stake, a responsibility to bear witness to the histories that form our collective human experience. And importantly, with graphic novels, this responsibility is not exclusive to members of a victimized group, but instead the medium invites outsiders to view, to understand, and to grapple with these histories, otherwise easily relegated to dense volumes of academic text. And so that through line really defines the remainder of the collection, which today stands as a representation of my piecemeal and incomplete approach to bearing witness to violence, from internationally recognized genocides to the more insidious harms of bigotry and exclusion. So that's, taken me from black and white race relations in the United States, issues on xenophobia and gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights and international relations. Most recently, and related to my studies at KU, the collections allowed me to engage with topics related to persecution of vulnerable populations in the Middle East and North Africa. Marjan Zatrapi's classic of the genre, The Complete Persepolis, as well as her more recent work, Woman, Life, Freedom, aid in this quest, using Zatrapi's often minimalist style with her biting critiques to represent the Islamic Republic of Iran's brutal repression against women, and more importantly, women's unflinching commitment to resistance. But this portion of my collection for me is filled out not actually by an author from the region, but rather by the writings of Joe Sacco, a journalist visibly at pains in his own work covering Palestine and Palestinians. In recent months, especially given my research on the region and time spent living in Jordan, a neighbor of Israel-Palestine, these graphic novels have provided a duller medium of engagement with the protracted conflict. In a media environment packed full of some of the sharpest images from war that I've seen in my lifetime, the graphic novel really provided a respite from that pain while meeting my requisite obligation to bear witness in those hollow words between never again, or in that hollow space between the words. And so this ability to overcome reconciliation with such acute and contemporary suffering encouraged me to reflect on collective experiences of violence in my own family's heritage, where such conversations are often difficult and usually left beneath the surface. During an early draft of this essay, I had such a chance while perusing a used bookstore over spring break, and it was there that I came across an old book with a bent cover, and recognizing one of the authors to be Joe Sacco, I started to flip through the pages, and a chapter titled Days of Devastation and the collaborative work Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, it caused me to pause. And I saw in those pages graphic depictions of scenes very familiar to me, with mountains stripped to their peaks and houses collapsing in on themselves. So for the first time, it was here that I was able to hold a graphic novel illustrating the violence of ecocide, poverty, and drug addiction that tinged the edges of my youthful summers spent in West Virginia with my grandparents. And it was from these grandparents that I first overheard whispered mentions of mine closures, opioids, and CPS. And it was around these grandparents that I witnessed as communities from their youth slowly disintegrated. And only through these authors' masterful combination of interview-based reporting, essay-style writing, and heartbreaking illustration have I found a medium up to the task of capturing the pain and devastation I've seen in West Virginia. Nevertheless, this obligation to bear witness does not end with my family's history, the news cycle, or my personal interests, as countless more stories unfold in pages outside this collection in its current state. Regardless of the collection's next edition, the graphic novel medium is only growing in prominence, promising adaptations of old works and publications of stories yet untold. And for each of these potential expansions on the theme of collective violence and the painfully human act of reconciliation, I and my collection both patiently await. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Carl. All right. So now we move on to our graduate division winners. Got to get these in the order. An honorable, oh golly, sorry, Kevin, I'm messing it up. It's all right. Pay no attention. Receiving an honorable mention in the graduate division is Christine Singleton for the collection entitled Why Wherever God Motions, a Black Feminist Phone Tree. Congratulations. There you go. Christine will receive a cash award in the amount of $100 and a gift card to Jayhawk Inc. And if you could spend a few moments telling us a bit more about your collection, please.
Thank you so much. So my name is Christine Singleton. My collection, Why Wherever God Motions, a Black Feminist Phone Tree, is a conversation happening across about 175 years of Black feminist theory, starting with Sojourner Truth in her Ain't I a Woman speech, given at the Seneca Falls Convention, going all the way to Alexis Pauline Gumbs in 2021. But my journey with Black feminist theory started with Marita Bonner in her 1925 essay on being young, a woman in colored. While reading that as a freshman at Spelman College, a historically Black college in Atlanta, Georgia, I felt seen for the first time at these intersections of my life, being young, being a woman, being Black, and recognizing that what I'm going through is not novel, it is not new, and that others have been through it before me, and that as long as I can recognize and see myself in that literature, that I can survive. And that is really the whole purpose of the collection. It is a phone tree because we are in a state of emergency, and these Black feminists are talking to each other. They are talking across generations. They are talking through literature. They are talking through music and art and poetry, and we just need to listen. And I believe Black feminism can save us all if we let it. Thank you.
All right, second place in the graduate division goes to Josh Navarro for the collection First Love, Lasting Legacies, Stories of the Lives of Presidents and First Ladies. Josh will receive a cash award of the amount of $250 and a gift card to Jayhawk Inc. So congratulations. And if we could hear a little bit more. There you go.
Well, thank you very much. At the heart of this collection is really a love for public service and a drive to uplift others. I really have a drive for civic duty, and so that's at the heart of a collection on presidents and first ladies and the relationships that they build through their lives. And so very much compassion driven is at the heart of that, and it's a career that I am hoping to embark upon in public administration and local government as well. So thank you very much.
All right, so finally, we have first place in the graduate division, which is to be awarded to Nicholas Hoekstra for the collection entitled For the Black and White, From Black and White to Every Shade of Gray, The Changing Dynamic of Good and Evil in Fantasy. Nicholas will receive a cash award in the amount of $500 and a gift card to Jayhawk Inc. I'm going to actually just stick this right here. We'll get that to you later, Nicholas. And if you would like to approach the mic and say a little bit more about your collection.
Perfect, just so I don't eat the mic. Thank you very much. Honestly, I didn't expect I'd be up here talking, but I'm very happy to share. My collection has two themes, and I'm going to talk about them separately. First off, I'm going to start with the theme of fantasy and good and evil in fantasy. I think fantasy is a lens by which we can kind of look at our society and our changing world. And my collection started when I was maybe 8 years old, with my mother reading to me on the couch J.R.R. Tolkien, starting with The Hobbit and going through The Lord of the Rings. What's interesting about Tolkien is Tolkien wrote his Lord of the Rings books after his experiences in the Great War, the World War I. And he wrote his book, as any of you who've read Lord of the Rings know, you have good and bad that are so clearly defined. Good is represented by these beautiful elves, beautiful men. the maybe not necessarily beautiful, but the charming and cheerful little hobbits. And then you've got evil, which are these ugly orcs, the ugly demons, the ugly men. In fact, they're described as black men, which is so horrifying today to think about. Like, I mean, I don't think Tolkien was thinking black in terms of race. I think he was referring to black in terms of maybe black-hearted, but still, everything that was evil for him was dark and was ugly. So that was what fantasy was. And when I was a child, that was so easy to imagine, because in the very simple morality of an 8-year-old, what I wanted to imagine was being the good guy and having clearly identifiable enemies, kind of thing. You know, that's the fantasy that goes in through the minds of children. As I got older, especially into adolescence, I started to become very interested in more recent fantasy in the 1980s, which had a lot of dark characters. Good and evil were still pretty clearly defined. And in my essay, I talk about the Dragonlance Chronicles, which were a very popular D&D based, Dungeons and Dragons based series of books in the 1980s. And within the Dungeonlance Chronicles, there's a very famous couple of characters, Raistlin Majir, this dark, evil mage who goes on basically a self-journey, beginning as a neutral kind of person that's neither good nor evil, becoming evil, and eventually, in a moment of self-sacrifice, saving the world. Now, why did I like this? I like this because as an individual with a disability, I often felt myself at the outsides of society. Growing up, middle school, high school, my friends would get together to play sports, they would get together to play video games. I was an afterthought. If I was included at all, it was because a parent told them to include me. So I knew what it was like to kind of feel that darkness, kind of go through those angst of adolescence. What adolescent doesn't go through angst, right? But when you're an adolescent that for one reason or another is a minority, some of those angst become much more present. So reading books where you have these characters that go through these dark moments felt very, very personal. I felt like I could see myself reflected in those characters. As I got older, as I started to get into the labor market, get into more of the real world, in air quotes, right? Because what's the real world? But I started to explore different types of fantasy that turned these ideas of good and evil on their heads. An author that I've really enjoyed is Joe Abercrombie, who starts out a series writing a novel very in the genre of the Lord of the Rings. In fact, I have a number of friends who stopped reading it after the first book because they thought, oh, this is just a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. Until you get through the second and third book where you realize he takes every popular trope of Lord of the Rings kind of style fantasy and turns it on his head. None of the characters are redeemable. None of the characters are truly good. They're all working in self-interest. But in a sense, they're all working because society has kind of pressured them. If you have a barbarian that society expects to be brutal and mean, well, it's really hard to break that mold, right? And if you have a wizard who has a lot of power, he's very unlikely to give up power. He's much more likely to try to gain more power and use that power to dominate people. And that's what Abercrombie kind of painted in what is now termed grimdark. It was kind of this genre that's become popular, especially in the last 20 years, of how we look at fantasy and we kind of see there's no real good and evil. It's a lot of gray. And as time has gone on, we've seen more and more fantasy go this area of grimdark, whereas in the last 5 years especially, we've seen a lot more fantasy that talk about good and evil are much less about the people and much more about the corporations and the agents, kind of like the big Amazons of the universe that control people for business interests. And good and evil is much less about the choices we make and are much more about the decisions we have to make in order to save ourselves or our families. So throughout my life, I've kind of followed this changing dynamics of good and evil and how that's kind of reflected my own changes in my experiences with the world from childhood to adolescence, and then eventually going into the workforce and seeing kind of how even when we try to do good things, sometimes we work for bad organizations, etc. But really briefly, I want to say the other very important part of my presentation was that what I wanted to really show people, especially with my physical presentation today, was for me what reading has meant and how reading has changed. From when I was a child, it was my mom reading to me on the couch because as a young kid, it was really hard to get access to books in any other format. As I got to be in adolescence, you know, that angsty period, well, it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable when your mom is reading that type of literature to you. And let me tell you, but that's when, that's when we started to discover books on tape. So at my display, I have a copy of the Dragonlance Chronicles, books on tape. As I got a little bit older, I started to discover books on tape from the National Library of Congress, who were volunteers that would read books onto cassettes, and you could request them via the mail. But oftentimes, these were books that would maybe be 10 years out of date, 5 years out of date. So, you wouldn't get access to that new novel that was just published. And now, more recently, we have organizations like Audible.com, which is part of the Amazon network, and a lot of authors would point the finger at Amazon and Audible being another type of evil. But what it has represented to me is been greater access to literature today than I ever had before. So part of what I wanted to also just kind of talk about throughout my essay was just how not only has my interaction, not only has my interest in literature changed, but also my interaction with literature has changed through the years, growing up, having very limited access to books, to now today, where I can almost get access to any book that I want in an accessible format the day that it comes out. Now, it's not perfect, and still a lot of indie authors don't necessarily get the same sort of attention and get all their books on audio, but that's when we have things like Kindle, which are now accessible as well. So thank you so much for listening to me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I also just absolutely admire the other contestants, and I'm super interested in some of the collections that I've just heard folks speak about. So thank you.
And we're almost done, and it makes me sad, but we have a moment to congratulate once again all the award recipients for our 67th annual Snyder Book Collecting Contest. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this wonderful tradition. Nikki, do you need the award winners to stick around, or did you get all the photographs that? Okay, so the award winners, if you can stick around for a moment, we'd love to get a photograph with you. Oh, and yes, there's paperwork. That's a very important part of this. So thank you again to all of our participants, judges, Snyder Committee, Laura, everyone who made this event possible. And please have a wonderful evening. Enjoy books and more refreshments and this wonderful company. So thank you.